Why did the water feel colder the moment they decided she didn't belong there? The flood trunk roared like a living thing. Cold, violent, unforgiving. Jets of pressurized water slammed against steel walls, red emergency lights slicing the darkness into pulses of chaos. It wasn't meant to be comfortable. It was meant to break hesitation, strip people down to instinct, and expose who could function when panic clawed at the spine. For most of the men inside the tank, this was routine. Another drill, another controlled disaster they would muscle through and joke about later. For Anna Reed, it was something else entirely. She didn't fight the water, she listened to it. While bodies twice her size slammed into bulkheads, she angled herself with quiet precision, letting the current carry her where brute force would fail. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, calm. Not the calm of confidence, but the calm of someone who had learned long ago that panic wasted oxygen. Still she felt it, the eyes on her, the unspoken judgment. Too quiet, too small, too female. She was new to this rotation, temporarily attached, officially there to audit communications and intelligence integration. Unofficially to them, she was an inconvenience, a guest, a reminder that not all warriors looked the way they expected. The primary patch went on clean. Her hands locked it into place using bone alignment instead of muscle, the way she'd been taught when leverage mattered more than strength. Water tried to rip it free. It failed. She moved toward the secondary cofferdam. That's when something shifted. Bull Roston met her halfway, holding the heavy equipment between them. The noise was deafening, alarms, rushing water, voices shouting through comms, but she still caught the grin behind his mask. Not camaraderie, not encouragement. Amusement. She gave the signal, 2 fingers, precise, universal. He ignored it. Instead, he shoved. Not hard, not obviously, just enough. The cofferdam slammed into her chest like a blunt weapon. Air exploded from her lungs. The world flipped. Her helmet struck steel with a sound that cut through even the roar. For half a second, there was nothing but red light and spinning bubbles. This was where panic usually lived. But Anna Reed had learned to survive places worse than this. She exhaled deliberately, protecting her lungs, orienting herself in the chaos. Pain bloomed sternum, skull, but she cataloged it instead of reacting. Minor concussion. No fracture, still functional. As she pushed off the wall, something drifted past her vision. Her patch. Black background, gray phoenix, digital flames. A symbol known to almost no one. Torn clean from her shoulder, disappearing into the churning water like it had never existed. Someone laughed. Static crackled in her ear, a voice laced with satisfaction. Looks like the chief went for a swim. She didn't respond. She watched as the others finished the drill using brute force, fighting the water instead of understanding it. Sloppy, inefficient, they passed barely. When the pumps kicked in and the water drained away, the chaos faded. Bright lights replaced red strobes. Reality returned. Anna Reed stood still. Water poured off her gear as she stared at a single point in the floor, a camera lens embedded in steel. She memorized the time, the witnesses, the bruise spreading beneath her uniform, the telemetry spike her biometrics would show. And the recording. There was always a recording. When the instructors arrived, one of the men spoke before she could. She lost her footing. The lie was smooth, casual, practiced. Anna said nothing. She simply touched the empty space on her shoulder where the patch had been. That small gesture did more than words ever could. Later, alone in her quarters, she peeled off wet gear with mechanical calm. No anger, no shaking hands, just process. She examined the bruise, assessed the concussion, logged the pain. Then she opened her laptop. She didn't rant, she didn't accuse. She gathered data. Video, audio, telemetry, 4 camera angles, one clear truth. She isolated the moment, synced the feeds, and watched the shove frame by frame, saved it, secured it, attached her biometrics. Her report was short, precise, almost cold. Facts only. When she hit submit, the system responded with a receipt. She placed it neatly on the desk. Duty done. She opened a small wooden box and removed a spare Phoenix patch, sewed it on by hand, stitch by stitch, not defiance. Restoration. That night she lay on her bunk staring at the ceiling, the ache in her chest pulsing softly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. But she was tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of silence being mistaken for weakness. Tired of systems that only worked when someone trusted them enough to push back. Still, she believed in the process. And tomorrow, she would find out whether the process believed in her. Because dignity, she knew, doesn't shout. It waits. Why did the room go quiet the moment she sat down? Anna Reed noticed it before she felt it. The dining facility didn't fall silent all at once, it thinned. Conversation softened. Laughter cut short, like oxygen being slowly pulled from the air. She carried her tray with the same measured steadiness she carried everything else, scanning for an empty table not out of fear, but habit. Corners meant visibility, walls meant control. She chose a table with her back to the wall and sat. Grilled chicken, rice, vegetables, standard fuel, nothing celebratory, nothing comforting. Her chest still ached beneath the uniform. The bruise was spreading, deepening, but she ate anyway, slow, methodical, each bite deliberate, as if staying present required effort. She felt it then, the looks. Not sympathy, not concern. Curiosity mixed with resentment. She had filed the report. Word had spread fast, faster than protocol ever did. A warrant officer, a woman, a visitor, filing on a SEAL lieutenant. Some saw courage, others saw betrayal. Most didn't know what to feel yet, and that uncertainty made people uneasy. Anna kept her eyes on her food. She reminded herself why she was here. Not to be liked, not to prove anything. She had trusted the system because it was designed to function without emotion. Data in, correction out. But systems only worked when people respected them. The doors swung open. She didn't look up immediately. She didn't need to. She recognized the weight of the footsteps, the confidence, the assumption that space would be given. Lieutenant Vyulov entered like the room belonged to him, flanked by Rostin and Carter. No trays, no pause, just purpose. Hers. The hum of the DFAC collapsed into silence. Vyulov stopped at her table and leaned forward, palms flat on the surface. Too close. Intentional. "Chief," he said loudly, voice smooth with mock concern, "I read your report." Anna finished chewing, swallowed, placed her fork down gently. Only then did she look up. His smirk deepened. "Very creative," he continued. "You ever thought about writing fiction? Hollywood loves that stuff." Carter snorted. Rostin loomed behind him, arms crossed, a wall of muscle meant to intimidate without touching. Yet, Anna felt the familiar pull inside her chest, not fear, disappointment. This was the escalation she'd hoped wouldn't come. "Non-procedural physical contact," Carter said, making air quotes. "That's what you call it when you can't keep up." Anna's voice when she spoke was quiet, almost gentle. "The term is defined in training doctrine." Vyulov's smile faltered for half a second. "You're a guest here," he said, lowering his voice theatrically. "You don't get to rewrite how things work, filing that report. You're making life uncomfortable for everyone." She nodded once, not agreement, acknowledgement. Inside she felt something tighten, not anger, resolve. "Withdraw it," Vyulov said. "Today, say you were disoriented, say you misjudged the situation." His eyes hardened. "Or your time here gets difficult." The word hung between them. Anna's mind shifted into assessment mode without conscious thought. Angles, distance, center of gravity, 3 hostiles, 1 leader fueled by ego, 1 muscle, 1 agitator, classic pattern. She breathed once, slow. "That sounds like a threat, Lieutenant," she said evenly, "which would be a violation of Article 134. That was the moment. She saw it in his eyes, the snap. The instant restraint gave way to entitlement. His hand shot out and clamped around her forearm, grip crushing, meant to remind her who held power here. "You don't lecture me," he snarled. "You're a clerk with a fancy title." Time slowed. Her heart rate spiked, not from fear but readiness. She didn't pull away. She moved with him. Her left hand rose, cupping his elbow, fingers finding the joint with practiced precision. She pivoted, dropped her center of gravity and rotated her wrist just enough. Physics did the rest. Vyulov's posture collapsed. His grip broke as pain ripped through his arm. A strangled sound escaped his throat as he went down to one knee. Carter lunged. Anna didn't look at him. Her leg swept low, hooking his ankle mid-stride. Momentum betrayed him. He crashed into a table, trays exploding outward in a metallic storm. Rostin roared and charged. Predictable. Anna sidestepped at the last second, caught his shoulder, guided his hip, and turned his mass against itself. The throw was clean. Textbook. He hit the floor hard, air leaving his lungs in a single helpless gasp. 10 seconds. Maybe less. Then stillness. Anna stood at the center of the chaos, breathing steady. Vyulov knelt, clutching his arm. Carter groaned amid scattered food. Rostin stared at the ceiling, stunned. She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, where Vyulov had grabbed her. The phoenix patch was flawless. No punches, no shouting, no wasted motion. The room remained frozen. Somewhere in the DFAC, a fork clattered to the floor. Anna looked around once, her gaze sweeping the stunned faces. She saw shock, fear, and something else now. Understanding. She turned back to her table, sat down, and picked up her fork. Her food had gone cold. She ate anyway. When the master at arms arrived minutes later, the adrenaline had already faded. Anna answered their questions with the same calm precision she'd used in her report. Facts only. Camera location. Time stamps. Recommendation to review footage. "They are no longer a threat," she said quietly. That sentence followed her. By the time she returned to her quarters, the base buzzed with something new. Not rumor, reckoning. She removed her uniform slowly, the ache in her chest reminding her that strength didn't erase pain, it only allowed you to move through it. Sitting on the edge of her bunk, she finally let herself feel it. The weight. The exhaustion. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't come to make an example of anyone. She'd come to improve systems, to protect lives she might never meet. Yet here she was, again proving that silence invited testing. She stared at her hands. How many times had she corrected quietly? How many times had she absorbed harm because it was easier than confrontation? Because being the calm one kept the mission intact. Tonight, restraint had still won, but it had drawn a line. She lay back and closed her eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Somewhere on base, footage was being reviewed, statements taken, careers tilting on unseen hinges. The system was moving now. But systems didn't feel guilt. People did. And tomorrow, those people would have to face what they'd tried to ignore. Because strength, Anna knew, isn't loud. But it leaves an echo. Why did the truth feel heavier once it was finally spoken aloud? Anna Reed stood just outside the operations center as the doors sealed behind her, the muted thud echoing down the sterile hallway. For a moment, she remained still, palms resting lightly against the cool wall, not to steady herself, but to mark the transition. Inside, the system was in motion. Inside, her data was speaking. She exhaled slowly and straightened her uniform, smoothing the sleeve where the phoenix patch rested. The ache in her chest had settled into something dull and constant, a reminder rather than a warning. She could live with reminders. What unsettled her was the waiting. She had spent most of her career moving ahead of consequences, anticipating, preventing, correcting before damage spread. Now, for the first time in a long while, she had handed control to others. That required trust. The summons came quicker than expected. A junior petty officer approached, posture rigid, eyes flicking briefly to the patch on her sleeve before snapping back to regulation. Chief Reed, Captain Evans requests your presence. No tone, no judgment, just procedure. She nodded and followed. The operations center was dim, lit by dormant screens and the soft glow of a holographic map table at its center. Captain Marcus Evans sat at the head, hands folded, his expression unreadable. Master Chief Torres stood beside him, arms crossed. Across the table sat Vyulov, Rostin, and Carter. They looked smaller somehow. Dress uniforms stripped away swagger. No smirks, no careless confidence, just stiff posture and tight jaws. Anna took her seat alone, a few feet away from the captain's side. She didn't look at the men. She focused on the table's faint blue light, steady and constant. The hearing began without ceremony. Video filled the screen. The flood trunk footage played first. The shove, the impact, the sound of her helmet striking steel, clean, indisputable, no context could soften it. Anna watched without reaction. She'd already lived this once. Then came the DFAC footage. Slowed, zoomed, every movement stripped of bravado and reduced to mechanics. The moment Vyulov's hand closed around her arm, the precise chain of responses that followed. Silence swallowed the room when it ended. Captain Evans spoke quietly. Lieutenant Vyulov, you claim she slipped. Vyulov swallowed. Yes, sir. Does this look like a slip? No answer. Does it look like an assault? A pause, then barely audible. Yes, sir. The words seemed to drain the room of something vital. Evans turned to Anna. Your report was restrained. Why? She lifted her eyes to meet his. Because escalation wasn't the objective, correction was. Torres shifted slightly, something like approval in his eyes. Evans nodded once. You trusted the system. Yes, sir. And when the system failed you? Anna considered that. It didn't, she said finally. It was delayed. The JAG officer stood and read the findings in a neutral voice. Hazing, assault, conduct unbecoming, threatening a superior officer. Each charge landed like a measured strike. When the partially declassified service record appeared on the screen, Anna felt the weight of attention shift toward her. She kept her gaze forward, jaw set. Decorations, commendations, deployments redacted but implied. She had never needed them to speak for her before. But now they did. Vyulov's face went pale. The realization arrived late but complete. They hadn't tested a visitor. They assaulted a guardian. Captain Evans let the silence stretch before speaking again. Your careers in naval special warfare are over. The words were final, unemotional. Anna felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only closure. The hearing adjourned. Chairs scraped softly as people stood. Vyulov and his men were escorted out, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed ahead. Anna remained seated for a moment longer. Evans approached her. I'm sorry it came to this. She met his gaze. So am I, sir. The apology wasn't personal. It was institutional. Later, the base assembled on the grinder. Rows of sailors stood at attention, the morning air sharp and unforgiving. Captain Evans spoke plainly. He named the failure. He named the correction. When Vyulov and his men were ordered to salute her, Anna returned it with perfect economy. No hesitation, no flourish. Just respect rendered and received. Master Chief Torres stepped forward with a small frame. Her original phoenix patch. Recovered. For the first time since the flood trunk, something inside her loosened. She accepted it with a nod. Back in the operations center that evening, Anna returned to her work. Encryption protocols, signal analysis, quiet tasks that kept people alive without ever knowing her name. Captain Evans watched for a moment, then spoke. "You changed this place." She didn't look up, the system did. He smiled faintly and left her to it. As the holographic map stabilized, Anna allowed herself one small breath of relief. The waiting was over. The correction was complete. And somewhere beneath the ache and exhaustion, a fragile hope took root. That next time, silence would not be mistaken for weakness. Because dignity, she knew now more than ever, doesn't demand attention. It earns it. Why did victory feel so quiet when the room finally emptied? Anna Reed noticed it as the operations center door slid shut behind the last departing officer. The hum of servers remained. Screens glowed softly, but the tension that had filled the air for days, no, for years, had evaporated, leaving behind something unfamiliar. Stillness. She stood alone at the central console, hands resting lightly on the edge, eyes tracking cascading lines of encrypted data. The mission simulation playing out across the globe continued without pause. Signals moved. Networks shifted. Somewhere, a team trained under safer conditions because of changes she had already implemented. This was where she belonged. And yet her chest tightened, not from injury this time, but from something harder to define. Relief had weight. The incident was over, officially closed, but closure didn't erase the echo of what had happened. It didn't undo the moment her helmet struck steel, or the way laughter had crackled through her comms while she fought to orient herself underwater. Anna had learned long ago that systems corrected actions, not memories. She finished typing a command and watched as the holographic map recalibrated, threat vectors smoothing into clean, predictable patterns. Order restored. It was satisfying in the way only engineers understood. Still, her mind drifted. She remembered being younger, earlier in her career, standing in rooms where she'd spoken only when asked, learning quickly that competence didn't always earn trust and silence often invited scrutiny. She had adapted, refined herself, became smaller in presence but sharper in impact. It had worked. Until it didn't. The door opened quietly. Master Chief Torres stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He placed one beside her without ceremony. "Figured you'd forget to eat again," he said. Anna allowed a faint smile, statistically likely. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching data flow. "You know," Torres said finally, "they'll be talking about this for a long time." She nodded. "They'll get the story wrong." He chuckled softly. "They always do." Her smile faded. "I didn't want to be a lesson." "I know," he replied, "but sometimes lessons choose their teachers." That sat with her. Torres glanced at the framed phoenix patch resting near the console. "You didn't have to go through it alone." Anna's voice was quiet. "I wasn't alone, I just didn't ask for help." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair." When he left, the room felt emptier again. Anna returned to work, but fatigue crept in around the edges. Not physical, she could handle pain, but emotional. The kind that accumulated slowly when you carried responsibility without recognition. Later that night, she walked the perimeter of the base. The air was cool. Stars scattered overhead like distant signal points. Her footsteps echoed softly against the concrete. She thought about Vulov, about Rostin, about Carter. She didn't hate them. That realization surprised her. They were symptoms of a culture that confused dominance with leadership, of silence mistaken for permission, of strength measured only in volume. She had corrected the system, but the cost lingered. Stopping near the edge of the training grounds, she sat on a low barrier and let herself breathe. For the first time since the flood trunk, she allowed the exhaustion to surface fully. Her hands trembled slightly. Not fear. Release. She closed her eyes and remembered the water, the cold, the moment of impact, the instinct to survive. Then she remembered the patch drifting away. That loss had hurt more than the bruise. It wasn't about the emblem. It was about what it represented, a lifetime of quiet mastery, nearly erased by someone else's recklessness. Now it was back, framed, restored. But something else had been reclaimed too. Her voice. Not loud, not angry. Present. The next morning, she briefed a mixed group of operators and analysts on the updated communication protocols. She spoke plainly, confidently, answered questions without apology. They listened, not because of rumors, not because of fear, because she knew what she was talking about. One young operator lingered after the briefing, hesitant, nervous. "Chief," he said, "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For showing that we don't have to be loud to be strong." Anna studied him for a moment, saw herself years ago. "You don't," she said, "but you do have to be honest." He nodded and left. As she returned to her console, Anna felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest, not pride exactly, something steadier. Purpose renewed. She knew there would be other rooms, other tests, other moments when silence would be challenged. But now she also knew this. Correction didn't require permission. And dignity, once reclaimed, didn't need to be defended again. It simply stood. Why did the next mission feel heavier than the one that nearly broke her? Anna Reed felt it the moment the secure briefing room doors sealed shut. The air inside was different, charged, not with hostility this time but expectation. Faces turned toward her, not skeptically, not dismissively, but with something new layered beneath the professionalism. Trust. It was heavier than doubt had ever been. She took her seat at the table, hands folded loosely, eyes scanning the quiet room. Operators, analysts, command staff, a cross-section of experience and ego now tempered by recent events. No one spoke over her when she began. No one smirked. Still, she felt the familiar tension settle between her shoulders. Trust raised the stakes. The mission itself was clean on paper. Communications overwatch for a joint exercise gone kinetic in simulation, multiple units, contested spectrum, aggressive jamming, a perfect storm for misinterpretation and friendly fire if things went wrong. Her role was to make sure they didn't. As the briefing progressed, she outlined vulnerabilities, predicted interference patterns, and recommended redundancies. She spoke in measured sentences, leaving space for questions. When challenges came, they were thoughtful, not dismissive. This was how it was supposed to be. Yet beneath the calm, Anna felt a quiet pressure building. The memory of the flood trunk lingered like a phantom ache. She knew now how quickly respect could vanish if she faltered, how fragile cultural correction could be. During a pause, Captain Evans caught her eye. A brief nod, not reassurance. Acknowledgement. The exercise began at dawn. Anna stood at her console in the operations center as the simulated battlefield lit up around her. Signals bloomed and vanished. Enemy jammers probed the spectrum. Friendly transmissions strained under the load. She adjusted filters, rerouted channels, predicted attacks before they landed. Minutes stretched into hours. At one point, a sudden spike threatened to blind an entire unit's comms. The room tensed. Operators leaned forward, hands hovering over controls. Anna didn't raise her voice. She typed. The interference collapsed, redirected into a harmless echo. The unit's communication stabilized. The room exhaled. No applause, no commentary. Just quiet competence. Later, during a lull, She felt the weight of fatigue press in. Not exhaustion of body, but of vigilance. Being the fail-safe meant never relaxing, never assuming the system would hold without her attention. She thought about walking away once, long ago, about choosing a role where her silence wouldn't be mistaken for absence, but she'd stayed. Because someone had to see the ghosts in the machine. When the exercise concluded successfully, the room remained subdued, professional, satisfied. Captain Evans addressed the team briefly, crediting the collective effort. He didn't single her out. She appreciated that. Recognition didn't always need a spotlight. Afterward, Anna retreated to a quiet corner of the base, sitting beneath a weathered overhang as the sun dipped low. She removed her cover and let the evening air cool her skin. She thought about what redemption meant. Not vindication, not revenge, but restoration. The culture hadn't changed because 3 men were removed. It had changed because a line had been drawn and held. She had held it. Not with anger, not with spectacle. With process. A message pinged softly on her device. A secure channel from Dev Grew. Assignment complete. Prepare for reassignment. She stared at the words longer than necessary. Leaving had always been the plan. Temporary attachment, correct, move on. Yet something tugged at her now. She had invested more than expertise here. She had invested herself. Later that night, she packed her gear with the same methodical care she'd always used. Each item inspected. Each memory folded away neatly. She paused over the framed phoenix patch, now wrapped carefully in protective cloth. It had survived being torn away. So had she. As she closed her bag, Anna allowed herself one small, private acknowledgement. She had been tested. She had not broken. And in the quiet aftermath, she had helped something fractured find its balance again. Sometimes strength doesn't roar back. Sometimes it steadies the ground so others can stand. Why did leaving feel harder than surviving? Anna Reed stood on the edge of the flight line before dawn, her gear packed, her posture composed, the world still half asleep around her. The sky was a deep, uncertain blue, that hour where night hadn't surrendered yet and day hadn't earned its place. The rotors of a transport aircraft ticked softly as they cooled, metal contracting in the cold air. She had walked away from worse places than this. Still her chest felt tight. Not fear, not regret. Attachment. She hadn't expected that. For most of her career, departure had been clean, mission complete, systems corrected, move on before familiarity dulled judgment. She had learned early that lingering made things complicated. People wanted explanations, gratitude, stories. She preferred clean exits and quieter footprints. But this place had changed her in ways she hadn't planned. Or maybe it had simply revealed something she'd been carrying for a long time. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn immediately. She knew who it was. "You always leave before sunrise," Captain Evans said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Fewer distractions," Anna replied. He nodded, hands clasped behind his back. "Command wanted to thank you, officially." She glanced at him. They already did by fixing the problem. A faint smile crossed his face. "You know that's not how most people measure success." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why most systems fail." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. "You changed the trajectory of this command," Evans said finally. "Not just procedures, people." Anna shook her head slightly. "They changed themselves. I just removed interference." He studied her, then extended his hand. She took it. The handshake was firm, equal. No ceremony. When he walked away, she felt something settle, a clean ending, the kind she preferred. As the aircraft prepared for departure, Master Chief Torres appeared, carrying a small object wrapped in plain cloth. He handed it to her without a word. Inside was a simple metal coin, No unit insignia, just a single word etched into it. Steady. Tears met her eyes, for the moments when the noise gets loud. She closed her fingers around it. Thank you. For holding the line, he corrected. She boarded the aircraft without looking back. As the ground fell away beneath her, Anna stared out the small window, watching the base shrink into geometry and lights. Somewhere down there, training continued. Systems ran cleaner. Voices carried more weight when they were earned, not forced. She wondered how long the correction would last. Culture, she knew, was like a system under constant stress. It required maintenance, vigilance, people willing to speak without shouting. She hoped there would be others. The flight was long, quiet. She welcomed the solitude. Her thoughts drifted, unspooling memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit. Early missions, close calls, times when restraint had saved lives, and times when silence had nearly cost her own. She had learned to endure, to absorb, to let discipline override emotion. But endurance alone was not enough. What happened in the flood trunk had not been the worst thing she'd experienced, not even close, but it had been different. It had been personal. It had tested not her skill, but her belief. Belief in systems, in process, in the idea that professionalism could still outweigh ego. That belief it held. Barely, but enough. When the aircraft touched down hours later, Anna felt lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because it had been carried honestly. Her next assignment was already waiting. Different location, different faces, same quiet expectations. She stepped into another operations center, introduced herself without flourish, and took her place behind a console. No one knew the story here. No rumors, no whispers. She liked it that way. The work began. Signals flowed, networks breathed, ghosts revealed themselves to those who knew how to look. Anna worked with the same calm precision she always had, fingers moving in small, efficient patterns. Around her, others moved faster, louder, more visibly. She didn't compete. She corrected. Late one night during a routine systems check, a junior analyst paused beside her, nervous, hesitant. "Chief," he said, "can I ask you something?" She nodded without looking up. "How do you keep steady when people underestimate you?" Anna stopped typing. For a moment she considered giving him a technical answer, something about process, about preparation, about not needing validation. Instead, she told him the truth. "You don't control whether people doubt you," she said softly. "You only control whether you doubt yourself." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. "When they test you," she continued, "let your response teach them who you are, not your anger, not your volume, your actions." He thanked her and walked away. Anna returned to her work, the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. Some lessons, she realized, didn't need an audience. As the night wore on, she removed the coin from her pocket and placed it beside the console. Steady. She thought about the water, the shove, the laugh, the silence afterward. She thought about the moment she chose not to shout, not to strike first, not to abandon the system she'd spent her life believing in. That choice had not made her weak. It had defined her. Strength, she had learned, was not about dominance, or spectacle, or leaving others broken in your wake. It was about restraint under pressure, about correcting what was wrong without becoming it, about holding the line even when no one applauded. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It documents. It waits. And when tested, it simply acts.